Hello to everyone. So, as you know, we are here for a special conference following this morning address by President von der Leyen, the yearly State of the Union. So we wanted to have a direct comment about it, as it's usually a very important speech, and this year maybe especially important. In order to discuss it, we'll have three speakers. First, Valérie Drezet-Humez, who is the head of the European Commission representation in France. So she's Madame European Commission for France. Will give views on this speech, and then we'll have as well comments from both deans of PSIA and of the School of Public Affairs, with Madame Arancha Gonzalez, who is here, and with Philippe Martin. Then, of course, as usual, we'll have, I hope, many questions and remarks, comments from you on this important speech. And so thanks a lot, Madame Drezet-Humez, for being here in Sciences Po. And I give you the floor for this comment.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this invitation. I'm very glad to be here with you today. I have to already start with an apology because I had planned to stay with you the whole time of the conference. Unfortunately, I cannot. This is quite a busy day for us, and I will have to be on France 24 after that, so I will leave you. But luckily for you, you're just going to win Jessica Larson, my deputy, who has been a Sciences Po fellow in the past, so much better, so she can tell you everything, how you move from this bench to the European Commission, maybe, if you're tempted by that. So let's start with this State of the Union speech. How many of you did watch it this morning? Can I ask the question? Well, not so bad. Good. So it exists now since 2010, and this is quite a political and democratic moment. So you have the President of the European Commission standing in the hemicycle in Strasbourg of the European Parliament and telling basically how she, in these times, sees what are the challenges and the issues at stake, and really what's the vision and how the Union should respond to that. One part, of course, is linked to the stock-taking of what has happened in the past, but you might have noticed when you watched the speech that it's not so much a kind of bilan, a rough inventory of every actions. This is now have been put aside in a brochure which has been distributed to the head. If you have anything, you're missing some reading, that's 63 pages you can read over and see all that has been done since last year in terms of proposal by the Commission and how it tackled a couple of issues, basically. First, maybe what I would like to share with you, and for those who watched it, it's just a bit the overall message and what the President projected this morning. Of course, it's a very unusual times. This is the first SOTEU, so that's the terrible acronym we invented for this address, of a President of the Commission in a time where war is in Europe. So it's not business as usual for sure. And this was very clear in the focus she gave on Ukraine. You have seen also the fact that she was wearing the colors and that the wife of President Zelensky had been invited by the president. So a clear willingness to show that this is an unusual time that we have to face together. At the same time, she really wanted to project the message that with solidarity and courage, we Europeans have done a lot already. Already last year, in the previous address, there was a lot of actions pointing to what we had done to face the COVID crisis. And now, of course, it's another magnitude, clearly. And this was very interesting to see this message of hope to really show the path towards what EU has to do together and to react to the issues which are still there and maybe others that will pop up as we have seen all this crisis. So along the speech, you see, for instance, that the words of unity, capacity to act, solidarity was very present. And that's very important because she really wanted to give a message of hope and saying, yes, these are tough and unusual times, but we have shown as Europeans that we can go through that. And together we found solutions. And Europe is solution, and Europe is also responding to the preoccupation, to the worries of its citizens. And this link is very important because, you know, we often hear Europe is far away, it's very strange, it's bureaucratic and whatever. Today, in particular this morning, we saw Europe really incarnated in Ursula von der Leyen with hope, willingness, solidarity, and solutions for people. And for me, that's a very important message in itself, beyond, of course, all the different announcements that we can go through quite quickly along the message. With what we have faced, we can carry on, even if it's an uncertain future. We have the means to do that, and that's very important to give that hope. Now, in terms of the subject, of course, this is not a Christmas tree. This is a speech with a line, so you don't have all the different elements. Also because from one address to the other, a number of building blocks have been already put on the table. Of course, you find a lot of emphasis on energy, and I think it's very important to keep in mind that here you have a complete convergence between the different agenda, for instance, with climate protection and environment. Of course, there is this wake-up call that with the prices of energy, we have to find solution, not so much as was said this morning on the prices, but on the type of energy and the model we want to live in. And this was already from the very beginning of the mandate of the president, within the political priorities that she had put on the table. And you know also that the Commission has put in law at union level to be the first climate neutral, carbon climate neutral continent by 2050. So all these priorities are still there, are being worked out, and it's not that they are not maybe formally mentioned through the speeches, that they vanish from the agenda. And that's interesting to see this connection. The same goes, for instance, with the food crisis, which is seen these days, and all the work that has been done with sustainability, with farming, with the new CAP, Common Agriculture Policy. Sometimes with CAP and PAC, I'm lost a bit on that. It's important to see that all these principles can be found. You have a very clear example. If you take having less fertilizers. If you have less fertilizers, that's good for the environment, and currently this is good because it's difficult to have access to them, and it costs a fortune. So that's what I call really the convergence of agenda that we have to keep in mind also when reading the address. Another dimension which is very important is the reference almost at the end about democracy. She really has made a very clear link that not only we are supporting Ukrainians with military support, with humanitarian support, with support to the refugees, and it's important because really they have been unlawfully attacked, but also because these people are fighting for values that are really the DNA of the European Union. Democracy, freedom of media, of expression, these are key elements. And she called really to be careful and to act to protect our democracies, because we have seen, for instance, with foreign interference, and I think there was some release yesterday by the Americans that they have some proof and some amounts that they will share with their allies, and we will see some things on that are really not only acting within their own countries, but are trying to make a mess, if you allow me this expression, in other countries, in Europe, also in the public opinion. And we see that, for instance, currently with the movement of the support of some French people to the support to the Ukrainian and the impact, so-called, of sanctions, whilst it is impact from the war and not at all from the sanctions. So the fight for democracy, I insist on that because you, in particular, she made this reference to young people, that it's very important not to take this for granted. We have taken peace for granted. Now it is a reminder that this was the beginning of the European project, and it is good also not to take it for granted. So that's another dimension, I think, which was very important throughout the address this morning. Now, of course, I don't want to go in all the details, so I would like to stop, but I wanted really to emphasize these two dimensions because I think also it's a red thread through some of your courses, I would say, and definitely as your engagement as young people for Europe. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Madame Drezet-Humez. Madame Gonzalez would like to have your views as a dean in Sciences Po, but also, it's not a secret, as a former politician. So you've seen a politician this morning. How do you assess her performance?
Thank you very much, Olivier. So let's say that the State of the Union address is a moment to send political messages. It's not a moment to issue technocratic proposals, but it's a moment where the President of the European Commission is speaking to Europe, but also to the world. So I got 4 big messages in her speech that I wanted to share with you. First, she sent a very clear message to Russia. And the message was basically that the EU will stand with Ukraine to the very end, whatever that end means, that it would spare no effort, that it would continue to support and supply as needed. But there was a second message to Russia also, and this relates to energy. It's no secret that the European Union at the moment is being attacked and that the weapon is energy. And the message from the President of the Commission was, we will not sit idle and let energy be weaponized in Europe. We will do our homework and achieve a European energy union that has been in construction for a while. She gave the big orientations. She didn't give all the details, but suffice it to say that the signal she's giving is Europe will cut its dependency on energy from Russia. It will do this with a word I like a lot, solidarity. And it will therefore accelerate its move to decarbonize the European economy. So that's the message number 1 to Russia. Message number 2, it was a message to China, but I guess also to the US. This message is the European economy will be strong because we will be investing into making the European economy stronger. First, she has said, flexibility on the fiscal rules, the fiscal compact of the European Union, which is basically signaling we will have the means of our ambition in terms of investments that the EU needs to undertake for its competitiveness. It has signaled trade agreements as a driver of competitiveness and growth for the EU. It is signaling investments on the small and medium enterprises that, let's face it, are more than 98% of the European economy. So this second message is to the big economies around the world to say the EU locomotive will roar. Also, interesting proposals need to be detailed on raw materials, which, as we know, will be essential to the decarbonization of the European economy and to the digital transition. The third message was to Europeans. And let's say that I took the message on democracy to be a very strong message for Europeans. And basically the message that I heard was, Europe is serious about democracy. This is the system that we think works best, but we know we have homework to do in Europe. And I like that, because we will only be credible on democracy abroad if we are credible at home. And I like a lot the message she sent on respect for the judiciary independence and fight against corruption, which we all know is attacks on the poor in Europe. So I like that message of directed to the Europeans. Be proud of our democracy, be proud of the system we think works best, but let's make sure that we put our house in order. To Europeans, she also, not just to the EU, but to Europeans, she also sent a second message. Accession needs to be completed. So we need to get serious about getting the members that abide by the principles of accession to the EU as members of the EU. But also she said something else that, frankly, I like a lot, because I do believe in it. Actually, Sciences Po is working on it, together with a group of universities and think tanks around Europe. We need to build a political community of Europeans, not just the EU, but Europeans. Finally, on this message to Europeans, she also very clearly said, it's maybe time to think of a new European convention. This is as encouraging as we know it's difficult, because we know what's happened when conventions have been produced in Europe, is that at some point you need to go back with the results of the convention to your legislators, and sometimes legislators are not answering to the convention, but they are thinking of the noise they can generate outside. And I like a lot that she linked the convention to young people in Europe, because in reality, the basis of the European, our European foundations, our legal foundations, need to enshrine this idea of young and future. Fourth and final message is a message to the world at large. Basically, her message was that the EU takes its responsibility seriously, that it will be investing, co-investing with others, with Africans, with Latin Americans, that it would be caring for global public goods, good, because someone needs to pay for these global public goods and someone needs to exercise leadership on global public goods. And she signaled that we need to conclude the Migration Pact in a dignified manner, and I like a lot the word of dignity. Now, what did I miss? Because it's good to talk about what one sees, but maybe it's also good to push the conversation forward. What did I miss? I missed a bit of international cooperation in this speech. The world she presented was a world divided between autocracies and democracies, and I think we need something a bit more than that. We need to build spaces where democracies and autocracies can work together, because without that, we will not be able to take care of global public goods. So I like democracy in Europe. I like democracy in the world. I like it so much that I think we have to invest more on that. But our argument cannot be that the world is separated by different political systems. Our argument should be that democracy is the system that delivers better results. So, Olivier, that's my read of this State of the Union address that I really enjoyed as, you know, a strong message coming from the top of the European institutions.
Thanks a lot for these comments, and I think we can applaud Madame Gonzalez. So, Philippe Martin, you are the last to give your general comments on this speech.
Thanks, Olivier. So Arancha said this was an important political speech, and I fully agree. Strong political messages, and maybe a bit scarce on technocratic details, and I understand why this is so. But because I'm a bit of a technocrat, I'm going to maybe ask more for details. And it's an important speech because of the circumstances and indeed because of this political message. The first thing, and I think both of you stressed this, is the issue of democracy, which is coming last, but it's not the least important, obviously. And this reminds me of a remark that Clément Beaune made when he came to Sciences Po a few months ago, and he was still the Minister of European Affairs at that point, which I think is super important. And he said that democracies, and maybe especially European democracies, are weak or potentially too weak in dealing with pressure from autocracies for, small to medium-sized stakes. And in some sense, I think we've paid for that, and we're paying for that. And I'm thinking of, obviously, of our past relations with Russia. But when it comes to, big issues, big stakes, and obviously democracy is the biggest stake, then democracies, and especially Europe, is strong. And I think I very much like this idea, because in some sense we should not just rejoice of saying, we are strong against Russian aggression, which is an aggression not only on the sovereign country but also on democracy and democratic values. But we should also see the other part of the message of Clément, who was, let's be careful, because the accumulation of weakness for small and medium stakes can at some point have huge consequences. So first point. Second point, she clearly said sanctions are working. And I agree, but up to a point. And to be clear, I heard also Thierry Breton make this argument, and I'm going to agree with part of the fact that indeed sanctions are working. And I think the president also made this argument, with those who are criticizing sanctions, are on the side of Putin and Russia. I think this is going too far. And Thierry Breton made also this point. I do understand that indeed there are some criticism of the way that sanctions are working, which I fully understand what is the political motive, and we know where they're coming from, and we know they are indeed pro-Putin. But I think it's going a bit too far, because it seems I thought I was a bit targeted. I did criticize some of the sanctions on Russia, but on the side of saying they are not strong enough, they are not efficient, and we should have a debate. One example, when there was this decision of the embargo announced for December, but in some sense nothing decided at the moment of the announcement. We just announced that there will be an embargo 6 months later. What happened is that indeed the prices of oil and gas, because there's also some uncertainty of what will happen on gas, increased immediately. So I think I'm an economist, and I think I can indeed criticize at that point the fact that maybe it was not the most efficient thing to do, to announce something that will happen in 6 months, change the expectations of the market, which obviously means that some of the students know exactly what I refer to. If you expect the price of oil to increase, the price of oil increases immediately. So just as an aside, I think it's not such a good idea to say no debate on the efficiency of sanctions. We should have debates of the efficiency on sanctions, maybe to say that we should change them, we should make them stronger. And again, I'm not naive on where some of this criticism is coming from. But just as an aside, I think debates is what we need to have in democracies, obviously. Then, clearly, there's also a very strong moral dimension, and she said, I'm quoting, "This is the price, the moral dimension of sanctions. This is the price for Putin's trail, deaths, and destruction." I fully agree, and I fully understand. But let's be clear. We have to remember and to think strategically. What are the objectives of sanctions? It's not only a moral objective. I understand this moral dimension, but the objective, remember, I think there was two: to change the incentives of Putin, basically to increase the cost of war, and to change its actions on the ground, and second, to make it harder to finance the war. So I think we should not forget that sanctions, it's not only a moral issue. It's it has to have an impact on the ground, and that means, and here I think we need to be a bit more precise. So I understand there's maybe some ambiguity which is useful on this, but we need to say, are we going to lift the sanctions if at some point, there are some negotiations, there's, and I think we need to be a bit clear on that, on the dynamic of what will happen to sanctions. Reconstruction plans for Ukraine. So there was a strong commitment, and I think this is super important. Of course, I would like to have more details, and I know that in Ukraine they would like to have more details on this commitment. There's actually right now, and it's unfortunate, but a conference organized by CEPR, the Center for Economic Policy Research, but also with Sciences Po on exactly this topic, and I'm going to join them with a Ukrainian economist on what's the macroeconomic plan of reconstruction for Ukraine. I think this is a very important discussion. Then there was the cap on revenues of companies that produce electricity at low cost. This resonates, of course, with some of the debates we have in France, but all over Europe on taxes on exceptional profits. In France, in the French debate, I have said that as an economist, indeed, exceptional profits, which are not due to the fact that these firms have invested, have been innovated, et cetera, should be taxed. I think from a purely economic point of view, it's efficient to tax this type of profits. I know that there are technical issues, and obviously the president was not going to go into there, but I think this is important. I find that it would be important that quickly we're going to have precision on exactly what it means, because again, it's not completely evident. So we need some work on this to do this, and I think this is welcome to have a cooperative solution or an harmonized situation on that. There is, but it's a bit wider than the speech of the president. The same imprecision a bit on price caps. I've been in favor, and with Beatrice Weber Di Mauro, with the president of CEPR, we've written on this, and several economists in Europe have talked about this, on a price cap on the price of gas in Europe. This debate has started, I think, in March, in April. We've had a lot of conversation. There's been some commitment by maybe, if I remember well, but maybe you'll say I'm wrong, by the Commission that yes, we're going to work on this, we're going to make some proposals, etc. Where are they? Where are they? We are in September. So if we're going to do a price cap on the price of gas, and I would be in favor of a price cap for the whole market, not only on Russia. I don't think that only on Russia will work. And then there's the debate, of course, on the price cap on oil proposed by the Americans. We need to work urgently on this issue. Technically it's complicated, it's difficult from a legal point of view also. But so here I would push the Commission. We've been talking about this since March or April. Where's the work? Okay. And so I think we need to go a bit faster on this. Yeah, and then there's the issue of the market design for electricity. Again, it's a bit technical. Are we going to decouple the price of electricity from gas? As an economist, I do understand that pricing at marginal cost is the most efficient way to do. But we are in complete. The market design for electricity was made for normal circumstances. We're clearly not in normal circumstances. Where I'm a bit worried is to what extent. What is the thinking of the Commission on whether this reform of the electricity market, where the price of electricity should maybe decorrelated from the price of gas, which has been multiplied by 2025, to what extent this is a structural reform, permanent reform of the electricity market? which I hope not, in a sense, because, again, as an economist, I think that marginal cost pricing is pretty efficient, in particular for climate change. Of course, it's important. Or it's only for these exceptional circumstances. And here again, I would love to have more clarity and more technocratic details, as Arancha would say. And I'll finish here. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Let me add a very general comments as well on the speech of this morning. If we compare it to the one done previously, is that the issue of environment, which is so important for this commission, was indeed present this morning, but mainly to me as a consequence of the Ukraine war. And it was a very striking comparison with last year or previous year, where that speech said, well, we have emergency regarding global warming, etc., and therefore we'll have important measures. This year, it's rather, there is a war in Ukraine, therefore a lot of consequences, and especially on the energy market, and therefore we'll act on the gas, electricity market. And by the way, it's rather good to limit the profit of the firms that supplies traditional energy for environmental reasons. But it was more presented as a consequences to me than as a focus in itself. Well, maybe it's also because the Ukraine is so important in the agenda that it explains this focus. Also, I understand that in such a speech, you need, as for an exposé in Sciences Po, to find a way to frame it, and it's not possible to have several ways. This being said, I see people sitting in the stairs, so we have room left if you want to sit in a normal chairs. And I open the floor for questions. So there are micros, as you see on the two sides. You should stand and go to the micros. Thank you, Monsieur, for starting.
Thanks a lot for this interesting speech and explanation about the discourse of this morning. I would have liked to talk about more, and I'm joining Mrs. Gonzalez, about the geopolitical aspect of this morning's speech, and on the more particular issues about like gas approvisionment. And she said that we'll have to find more and more partners and reliable partners. And I'm linking my question to the new agreement that was made 2 months ago with Azerbaijan, and with the new attacks made by Azerbaijan against Armenia. And I know like the speech of this morning was a real support to Ukraine, but I thought it would have been a good also like communication a point to also try to go to support the Armenian population. So what is the Commission position on the attacks, and also like on the partnership with Azerbaijan? Is it still a reliable partner, or should we like find someone else? Should we sanction them as we did with Russia? So yeah, I know it's a political and geopolitical question, but feel free to. Thank you for.
Maybe I will give the floor to you, as you have to leave soon.
Yeah, I wouldn't have missed that question. Definitely. One thing first is to establish the facts, and so there is an EU special envoy who is traveling, maybe has arrived over there to see what's going on. The High Representative Josep Borrell has made a declaration indeed on trying to appease the thing, and that's why he sent the special envoy to find the facts and look at the situation. Since 2020, it has been the most casualty since then, so we are really looking at this. In terms of the impact on the gas imports from Azerbaijan, we'll see when the facts precisely are cleared and clarified to see what might be the impact on the reliability on type of partners we are partnering with, that's for sure. Since I have the floor, I can't resist to make an echo to both your comments previously. First, one point which is very important, talking about sanctions and talking about it. I fully agree with you. We shall talk about everything. And in fact, the way the sanction methods are made are precisely foreseen for that, because each time they have a time cap, and they are reassessed to see whether it works, whether we need more, whether we maybe need less, and these kind of things. I think the echo this morning in the address was to precisely mirror the, let's say, other messages we know where they come from, as you said, which are going so far in the other direction and trying to play on the fear of people, saying that's because of sanction and not on the war, that pushed also for this very firm and maybe broad statement that it is working. Then in terms of application delays, I hear you, so that's another dimension. But I think given the evolution in the member states and the very clear need to maintain solidarity, as she said many times, as a key to solution and effectiveness, has probably triggered this kind of overall messages on that. I remember on the effect of sanctions, so you've heard, for instance, a very prominent thing that it put in the limelight the dependency of Russia, the other way around. So I think that's also a very interesting thing, saying that now two-thirds of their planes, maybe especially with winter coming, it's going to be difficult for them to move and these kind of things, is an interesting thing to reverse the dependency debate. And I think this should be highlighted. So I'm not saying it's perfect. I agree it has to evolve and we need to talk about them, but that's very important. On the environment, well, as I said in my introduction, I see that as a kind of building blocks making an evolution. That's why she probably didn't mention that so much. But I didn't see that as so much as, and by the way, it's good for the environment, because the vision is there, the objective is there, climate neutrality 2050. Fit for 55 package was proposed in July 2021. It is now negotiated by the European Parliament and the Council. So it's there. Mm-hmm. And in fact, with, for instance, Repower EU of May of this year, it's just accelerating, in fact, the objectives that have been put in 2021. So that's where I see, for me, the agenda, it's not being lowered down or being a consequence. It's just that they make progress, and because of the war, our climate and environment agenda has been sped up.
Okay.
On this note, I'm sorry, but I have to leave you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Now I call Jessica Larsson, who is the deputy representative of the Commission, to take the seat. Arancha, do you want to comment on the Armenian? No. Okay, let's move to you, Mr.
First and foremost, thank you very much for your speeches and the analysis of the President of the Commission speech. My question is about a topic that was not touched upon in your speeches, but that was briefly talked about by the President, and that is the Conference on the Future of Europe. Mm-hmm. She made a general a point of trying to follow up on the proposals of the Conference on the Future of Europe. And I wrote my bachelor dissertation on the conference, and the list of proposals is a wish list of what we would like the European Union to be. And I'm Italian. I'm seeing what will happen in 2 weeks. In my country, I really don't believe that they are going to happen. But my question is, do you think, it's a general question, not aimed at anybody in particular, do you think that there is a possibility that maybe the most, let's say, material points of the conference can be achieved? For example, the President talked about psychological help for people. And do you think, to what extent can we achieve as a union the conference proposals that I think we would like to achieve completely? But
thank you.
Thank you very much.
let me give information points, which is the fact that she mentioned two things. She mentioned the fact that there could be new kind of conferences, maybe a kind of institutionalization of these conferences where randomly selected citizens could participate to talks, imagine the future, etc. But she also said, from a different point, that she was in favor of opening a convention, which, as you know from the treaty, is the preliminary to a treaty revision. And, very logically, this convention could, as a first duty, take into consideration what was proposed during the conference last year. Madame Sanchez?
So I would say that first she has signaled that the method that was used, the citizens' panels, will be retained. And I think this is good, because this is about democracy, that you're going to work much more bottom-up, that you're going to give citizens the opportunity to put their issues on the table. Number two, you're right that she's not been very precise about what happens with the proposals that are on the table, but from her speech we know that she has already picked some of these proposals and suggested implementation, like, for example, mental health, which is a real issue, as we know, both as a result of the pandemic and the stress of the war in Ukraine. And number three, and joining what Olivier is mentioning, she is indicating that maybe it's time to open a convention. Now, a convention is essentially the most ambitious part of what citizens told the Commission in this round of citizens' panels, which is treaty change. So, for all these reasons, so the method of consultation, much more bottom-up, two, implementation of suggestions that citizens had already put on the table, and three, the idea that we should not shy away from opening the debate about treaty change, although in my experience, this is going to be very tough. I'm hopeful that she is hearing the message that's coming from the bottom of the pyramid.
Mrs. Lassen?
Yes, and I would like to add that, I mean, you know, what I really liked in this speech was that it was really focused, and it really had a very clear thread, a very clear narrative. So it was not a Christmas tree, so everything was not in it. And indeed, she mentioned the conference on the future of Europe quite quickly compared to the expectations that were created. But you need to see the State of the Union as a package. And in this package, you have the brochure, which comes 1 week earlier about the achievements of the Commission during the year. And then you have the letter of intent, which is sent the same day to the President of the Parliament and the President of the Council, so the Czech Prime Minister for the moment. And in this letter of intent, you have the mention of the key initiatives for 2023, and out of 30 initiatives, 13 are marked with an asterisk because they directly follow up or indirectly contribute to a proposal made during the conference of the future of Europe. So there is much more than what could be said in the speech, and yes, indeed, from what I understood this morning from the speech of the President is really that participatory democracy is here to stay in Europe.
Question?
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentations. I was wondering if we have more information on the cap on the revenues of the energy companies, and also especially the impact it will have on consumers. I heard in the speech that she said that all the revenues that would be gathered would be sent to member states, and I'm wondering if they are obligated to convey 100% of this money to citizens, consumers, and especially, that's my main question, to targeted income support to low-income households who struggle to heat their homes. So yeah, thanks.
Thanks a lot. So what was mentioned within the discourse was the amount of 140 billion euros, 140 milliards d'euros, that would result from capping the benefits of low-cost electricity suppliers and giving back to member states. I don't know, Philippe, if you have some ideas on how this could be done, or what the plans are.
I mean, I have plenty of ideas how to spend 140 billion euros, but they first have to be on the table, and then maybe you have some information on this. No, on this, I do think that indeed we should go towards more targeting of support to households. In France, as you know, we have a lot of rebates, price caps, general. Going towards more targeting, I think, would be good in France, because indeed it helps those who really need it. Be careful, because the problem of targeting is that here it's not only low-income households, is that there's a lot of heterogeneity across inside deciles due to the equipment. And in fact, if you look precisely, some of the households who are in the second, third, or fourth decile of income are actually more affected by the energy prices, because maybe they have one or two cars, they are heating their house with gas, etc. So, and that's where the targeting becomes more difficult. In France, it's very easy. In 2 weeks, you can send a check to low-income households. That's easy. But maybe they are not the ones that we want to target precisely. And maybe I in defense, maybe of the French economic strategy, which I think we went too far. So we need to rebalance a bit towards more targeting towards households. The inflation rate in France is 6%, 3% below the average in the Eurozone. Yes, it has microeconomic costs. You know, in economics, all these triangles, efficiency triangles, because we are not sending the right signal to the consumers, etc., etc. It has a big cost, fiscal cost also, but it has some macro gains. I talked to somebody at the ECB who, I won't mention the name, but was telling me France is helping the ECB from that point of view, because we lower the average inflation rate in the Eurozone, and that means that the ECB does not have to increase as much its interest rate. So I would have a bit of a more balanced view on this. I do understand the inefficiency from, and in particular from a climate point of view, but let's be clear. Do we really think that we can pass through all the price increase from gas prices and electricity prices to households? There's no way. There's no way. And in fact, it would be, as you know, the elasticity, the price elasticity of demand, how households react to this price increase is very important, and it's pretty low in the short term. So, you know, price caps for households, typically economists hate them because that means there's some excess demand somewhere, and that means that we need to have a protocol for rationing, and maybe we will have to do this, but it's clearly not efficient. However, in a situation where the supply curve, the supply curve and the demand curve are almost vertical, because, you know, the supply curve, the gas is Russia. Do they react to prices? I don't think so. The demand curve, do they react to prices? Not so much in the short term. So that means that actually these triangles of inefficiency are not that large, in fact. And the excess demand that you create by putting these price caps may not be that huge. So again, I think in France, for example, we need to rebalance towards more targeting. But look at UK. UK wanted to have a full pass-through of prices towards households. It's just not possible. Socially, politically, it's just not possible.
Can I add a dimension that maybe has gone unnoticed? And this is that in member states, in the EU member states, there is a political debate about whether or not to tax the profits of the companies that are producing energy with fossil fuels and the benefits of the companies that are producing electricity with low-cost renewables. This debate was there, and it was not a debate on rational economics. It was, as usual, it was a political debate. If you say so, I'm going to be against. And if you do 100, I will ask for 140. And I think the message from the president had the virtue of siding on the side of those who say that there is a temporary and emergency need, both temporary and emergency need, to maybe not let the market function in the way it would normally work, which is the company that makes the profit gets all the profit, and that there is a need today to use parts of this profit to redistribute. How this will be done, in my view, it's going to be left to the member states to decide. And that may be a source of inequalities, and it may be a source of distortions. But I think one virtue from the speech was to side on the side of those who within the member states were arguing for limiting the benefits, the profits.
Including, I can say that on my name, within some government, like the French one, who are seemingly internally divided on the opportunity to tax. Mr.?
Yeah. Hello. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for holding this conference. My name is Gonzalo, and I studied a master's in international security. Well, you all spoke about this message that the president shared about needing more union and more integration, given the crisis that we're facing right now. And of course, this is the way to go, and with further integration, some of the problems that we may have now could have been avoided. So we talked about, for example, the energy union, and of course the further cooperation in terms of the European security and defense policy. So, of course, it makes sense, but in some cases it seems that, or it looks like it conveys the message that we are just moving forward because we cannot move backwards, because basically we have burned the ships, so to say. And in some cases, this has fed Euroscepticism, or the message of political parties who are in favor, maybe not of leaving the European Union, but bringing it back basically to a forum of independent sovereign states, because there is this perception that they use, well, a club of technocrats who are a bit detached from reality. So my question is, do you think that there is a problem in terms of how the EU frames or conveys the message of moving towards further union? And as my colleague Humberto was saying, for example, this proposal or this initiative of the Conference on the Future of Europe, which is very good initiative, but it seems that it is not leading to actual results or measures. How could this be tackled? And, well, do you think that this is an actual problem? Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Larsens?
Thank you. If I understand right your question, it's about the image Europe is projecting, and also the rise of populism, and maybe the fact that Europe is not convincing, or, I mean, did I get right or seen as technocratic? And okay. This is not a new question. If I go back to the speech of the president this morning, I mean, personally, I was very impressed by the depth of the historical reference she made in her speech. I found she was very clear about who we are and where we come from. And what impressed me as well is that even if we've been managing crisis, I mean, the financial crisis, the COVID crisis, and now the war in Ukraine. The fact that Europe has improved in this crisis management, but what impressed me with this crisis is that there is a vision. It's not just a crisis management mode, it's crisis management with a vision of who we are as Europeans and where we are aiming to go. And actually, the speech she delivered this morning was far from technocratic. I mean, actually, for the people who like to have more detail, it might have been frustrating. But it was really about values which were completely embodied. I mean, I found it touching that she invited those two young ladies from Poland to exemplify European solidarity in welcoming Ukrainian refugees, and all those was resonating also with, I mean, many things she said were resonating also with World War II, and the reasons, the very deep-root reasons why the Union was created. So I'm not really answering your question, I'm fully aware, but I mean, she also referred to the fact that, and I think this is something probably the Commission has not done enough, is to fight disinformation. And I can tell you now that there are a lot of colleagues in the Commission and resources being strengthened to fight disinformation, because there is this understanding of how deeply it can affect our democracies and manipulate also citizens' opinion, citizens' understanding of the debates. So there is a lot to do, and she clearly mentioned it on fighting ingerence, fighting disinformation. So there is a lot of work ahead of us. Yeah.
Thank you, Madame.
So thank you very much for your intervention. One of the things that is, I believe, the most reproached to the EU is that it's not democratic enough, and the Conference on the Future of Europe was maybe a way to try and solve that. So what does the idea of creating a more like European political community and trying to have the EU be reflected by young people and their values and integrate them into the treaty mean for Europe? Will this mean that we will see a new treaty, maybe one that will give young people more power? Will this mean that we will see maybe transnationalist lists for the European Parliament that will mean that maybe young people will be more represented because some countries have different ways of choosing their representatives for the European Parliament? Basically, what will it do to truly reflect, or are those just empty words? And will trying to integrate young people into treaties mean just amendments, or trying to create a real treaty saying that we want young people to feel valued, to feel represented, and not just be people in Brussels that are old people that already like worked, that have experience? Basically, what will we do to democratize Europe even more?
Wow, that's tough. That's tough. Let's say that first, let's fix what we can fix today. And let's make sure that young people, let's start with this part of your question because it's much bigger, but let's start with what young people can do today, which is participate in elections. Let's make sure that the rates go up a little bit, because to be quite honest with you, we haven't seen great numbers. Last time, it was a little bit better than the past. Why? Because you made a point that for you, climate change was a critical issue, and that you would measure politicians and you would measure political lists and participation depending on whether or not they were responding to your request for acting on climate change. They did, and you reacted. Good example. We didn't need treaty change for that. What we needed was a better connection between what citizens are asking for and what is the top priority in the political lists on offer. So let's say that there is a space that I'd like to invite you to transit. We're going to have elections to the European Parliament in 2024, if my memory serves me right.
Yes.
And I think it would be very good to start, if I were on your shoes, I would start working in 2023 to make sure that you put on the table what matters to you. Number two, how can we change existing rules and existing treaties to make sure that they are more reflective of a better type of democracy in Europe? This is what, up until now, there was resistance to do, because, frankly speaking, having been on the other side fighting for treaty change and bumping into the wall of domestic referenda that would block progress was not very satisfying. So there is a bit of angst in Europe, let's face it, to open this debate. But I think the president has been courageous. She has opened this, and maybe she said, maybe it's time to think about treaty change. So the important thing, if I were in your shoes again, is to think of what is it that you would like to see in those treaty changes. What is a must-have if we decide to change the treaties? Number 3, European political community. That's a bit of a different animal, although it's got to do with Europe. What the president of, and it was the president of France that launched this idea a few months ago, he said that there is time to think of building a European political community, not a European Union political community, we have one, but a political community, some sort of G-Europe, like we have a G7 or G20. Let's think of, in terms of a G-Europe, which would include, obviously, the EU, which would include, obviously, members that are on their path towards becoming members of the EU, but that would also accept countries that do not have as an aspiration to join the EU, but they sit in Europe, like Switzerland, like Norway, like maybe the UK. And let's also think of an actor in Europe called Turkey that is proving to be a phenomenal geopolitical actor. So the idea behind this political community is, can we build a space that binds all these Europeans, that gives a political visibility to the continent, that needs this visibility as a project that is distinct from what is on offer on the other side, which is Putin's Russia. So that is interesting to see that the idea launched by President Macron was met with a lot of skepticism, because some thought that this was a means to distract the attention from accession. Once this was clear, now we've got two big political moments that have aligned a positive response. First was the Chancellor in Germany supporting this idea a week ago. Now is the President of the Commission. So maybe this is a possible, maybe it flies. And it would be good, in my view, but now I'm speaking in purely my personal capacity. I think if there is something that this political community should have is a color that binds citizens in this space. How we do that, whether it's mobility of people, whether it's mobility of students, whether it's specific rights, is something that binds the people of Europe. Because at the end of the day, we need the legitimacy of the constructions, political constructions we give an impulse to. Sorry for the long detour, but you've provoked me with your question.
Thanks a lot. Mister?
I think I've kind of jumped the line. I think she stood up before me.
No, please go ahead.
Okay. I wanted to come back to the issue of implementing the European Convention on the Future of Europe as a permanent institution, which I see rather critically, because we already have the possibility to start a European referendum. We have the EU Ombudsman, we have the Council of European Regions and Municipalities, which are all institutions that, I don't want to say useless, but they lack political power. So my question is, isn't the idea to implement this convention as a permanent institution, isn't that just a convenient excuse in order to dodge away from the real issue, namely treaty change?
Yes. Once again, well, first, Ursula von der Leyen was rather cautious in her mention, which means that she was not very clear on what she proposed on that aspect. She said that there should be follow-up or further institutionalization, but she didn't say, as I understood it, that she should become a permanent institution, like other institution, for instance. And as we said, she clearly commit herself to the convention. So we cannot say that the prospect of continuing the conference would be a way not to change the treaty, as she said really that she was in favor of opening a convention, which, by the way, is not really her responsibility, but more the responsibility of the European Council. But still, if an actor like that commit herself, it's a good point.
I understood more the institutionalization aspect, more on the continuation of citizen debates, of debates with citizens and of this participatory democracy. I didn't understand the convention as being institutionalized, but voilà.
Yeah. Let's take another question.
Hello. Well, thank you very much for your presentation. It was very enriching and interesting. I would like to go back to the fact of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and as it's already been mentioned, also I think the microphone is a bit weird.
It's okay.
Yeah, a lot of sanctions imposed, for example, the ones that hold the preferential visa regime are targeting regular citizens and not decision makers. What would be the Commission's official posture on the possible conditions under which at least some part of the sanctions would be lifted? Thank you.
Can you repeat the very end?
Sorry?
Can you repeat the very end of your question?
Yes, so what would be the Commission's posture on the conditions under which at least some part of the sanctions would be lifted?
Okay. Mrs. Larsen, do you...
To be honest with you, I don't think this is part of the discussion right now. The conditions under which the sanctions could be lifted, and I think the President today, she was quite clear in her speech when she said that the time now is not for appeasement, the time is for resolved. So the time is really about showing this unconditional support to Ukraine. So, you know, and the discussions with the member states, as you can see, it's not always easy to come to compromise, but it's also the strength of the European Union to bring compromise, to bring decisions. But the focus has mainly been on the content of the sanctions. And I don't think yet on their how they could be disentangled. And today, what the President said was really that, let's be clear, the sanctions are here to stay. That's more what I heard. So,
Philippe, you want to?
No, but I understand that indeed when we think, I understand that it's not the time right now to talk about lifting sanctions, but we need to think about, you know, what in the next few months, what will happen. And I think we need to have a strategy of indeed possibly thinking of lifting some sanctions, conditional on, of course, what we see on the ground. But it's true that it's clearly not right now when the war is raging and when the aggression is clearly still in full blown that we can have this discussion.
Have a question?
Yes, I have a question for Philippe Martin regarding the oil embargo, or rather the communication of the oil embargo. What would you have done differently?
So first, I think that this discussion and technical details about what can be done on the gas and the oil should have been done much earlier. I don't understand that we still don't have the technical work. Okay, so I know it's complicated. On gas and oil are different. On gas, I think that a price cap should be implemented at the overall as a regulation on the spot market on gas in Europe. There will be an issue in the sense that, of course, if you put a price cap, say, at 100 euros per megawatt hour or 150, there is clearly an issue that you still want to attract LNG from the outside world. So in some sense, there's a problem because you want to segment, in some sense, the two markets, and that's not going to be that easy. But I would have put a price cap on the whole gas market. And in fact, I think that part of the increase in price is I don't know if it's speculation or expectation. In some sense, it doesn't matter. But it's the expectation that potentially the price can go to 500, 600, to completely I mean, they're already stratospheric prices. But I do think that part of the very high prices come from the fact that there's a probability that indeed in 2 months the prices might rise enormously. And from that point of view, gas becomes an asset in the sense that if you think that the price will be high tomorrow in some events, then you'll buy a lot of it and you want to buy it now, and that means that the price increases immediately. So putting a price cap could actually, even at a relatively high level, to allow for LNG to come from outside of Europe, I think would help. On oil, which is super important for Russians because it's actually the majority of their fiscal revenues, I was not very much in favor of the American proposal, which, as you know, is also a price cap, so I think it's pretty difficult to put into place. But as soon as, you know, the Americans put this proposal on the table, and I had some discussions with them on that, I mean, you know, if the Americans want to try to do it, we should go along and go on that. Again, very difficult technically. I'm not sure it will work. We've never done sanctions on prices, actually. I think it's the first time. We always do sanctions on quantities. We don't know how it works. So, you know, there's high probability that it does not work, etc. But I think it's worth trying. I think it's really worth trying. And here, I think the Americans are waiting for Europe. They are waiting for, you know, some concrete actions. And to be frank, here also the French government is not seen as the most, you know, active in terms of trying to do this because there's a lot of uncertainty on how it would work. So again, I mean, again, I'm going to have my technocratic hat. We need to do the technical work now on these issues, how it's going to work, what it means if there's excess demand. To be credible, we have to have a protocol on rationing if indeed there is excess demand. And here the Commission has done some of the work. I do agree on that. But again, so price cap on oil and on gas. And I think at least on gas, I don't say it's easy, but I think it's really feasible.
Okay, thank you.
So I think it's a good point for the difference of the rationality of economics and politics, because we see that economically it was risky to announce too much time in advance that there will be an embargo. But politically, it also seemed that heads of state and government had to say that they were doing something, that they will do something. And remember, during the French presidency, when there was a special council in Versailles, there were a lot of criticisms in the day following the council, saying, well, you are not that active against Russia, etc. So politicians have, it's clear that they have to send signals that they do something, that they deliver.
Okay.
Madam?
Thank you. My question is, how politically binding is the address from President von der Leyen? So just maybe to precise my question, Dean Gonzalez, you said that she was addressing the US, China, Russia, the rest of the world. What do you think is their perception of that address, and how is it binding for Europe?
So this is not a legally binding document or speech, but it is a politically committing message. So she is politically committed to act on each and every one of the items she has put on the table. And let's not forget that she has two State of the Union addresses from past 2 years, on which in December she reports on what has happened. So I would do a very thorough check in December on what she says of how much they've done, of what they said they would do a year ago. That's my measure. But it's a committing message in the sense that, take an example. In the last State of the Union address, she said Europe would ban imports of products produced with forced labor in the EU. Just today, there was a piece of legislation that the Commission has proposed to enact this message that she sent. So she is basically outlining a program of work for the remainder of the year. How does the rest of the world look at this? Let's say that when I was working in the European Commission, we didn't have a State of the Union addresses. So the president would go in a very boring manner to the European Parliament and would say, this is what I'm going to do, da-da-da. But there was no seniorizing this political space, which is Europe. And you need to think that what this State of the Union address does is it is a signal for the rest of the world that there is a quote-unquote government in Europe that has a plan, a program of work that it will roll out the rest of the year. So in a way, it's a means to incarnate in political terms what is normal in national terms. In every country, you look at each one of your countries, the head of the government of the country goes to parliament once a year and says, this is my big program for the year.
Not in France, but okay.
Well, you don't have the head of the government. You have the head of the state that does that. It's even better because you have a presidential system. But in European terms, this is the closest you can get to visualizing that there is a plan in Europe and that someone is in charge of executing it.
Let me add that there were some critiques after a speech from some MEPs saying, well, if you do respect parliamentary democracy, we have to decide and we have to bargain between EU institutions, and you cannot like that take for granted that we will follow you on all the priorities you give. So a balance should be found in such exercise between voluntarism, political voluntarism, embodying the EU, etc., but also showing that she is ready to bargain and to discuss.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm sorry, on this, I don't know any government that would go to Parliament to say, can I have permission to give you an idea of the menu that we could cook together the following year? I don't know.
Yeah, but
so in reality,
usually they do that with citizens before elections, which is a bit
she
the
did.
issue with the EU.
Which she did. Let's not forget that she had a big plan in 2020 that she laid out, not in 2020, in 2018. She had a plan, and you can go to that plan, and you can now check with a piece of paper what she has delivered. Now, obviously, she's proposing. She is proposing, and in the European system, the proposal that she puts on the table has to be validated by two chambers, a chamber of member states and a chamber of elected representatives from the citizens. This is the European construct. So what she's doing is she's saying, this is my compact with you guys, but obviously it's up to the two chambers to give her the view.
Okay. Mrs.
Hello. Thank you very much for today's evening. My name is Tatiana. I come from Belarus. I do Max program here in human rights. So my question here, and maybe a little introduction. So there was one more statement from President today about rethinking of foreign policy. And she mentioned that it should be changed towards Armenia, Georgia, Western Balkan countries. And the Europe is not complete without them, and they are totally a part of Europe. So the first question, what does it mean actually? What are the next steps, maybe next proactive steps? Because now it's definitely time not to be reactive, yes, and from European Union? And the second question, probably directed to Madame Gonzalez, you mentioned that there should be in this like fight between autocracy and democratic countries, there should be also like a place for dialogue, something like that, with autocracies. Maybe also your ideas, how could it be, how could it happen, in which conditions? Like when we see Russia and Belarus actually also, and their leaders are blind and deaf towards what other countries translate to them, yes, and transmit to them and say them regarding the war in Ukraine and repressions in their countries, their own countries. And we have 2 years of repressions in Belarus, which does not stop. So what are the perspectives, so possibilities there to have such a dialogue with such countries and such regimes? Thank you.
Okay, if you could clarify your question about, I mean, the dialogue you mentioned with countries who are already candidates, or it's larger, it's also with countries like you mentioned China, you mentioned...
No, it's two separate questions, yeah.
Okay,
so,
yeah, sorry. Okay, I think, so if I start with the candidate countries to enlargement, then I think, you know, as we know, there is a well-set process, and normally this process leads to quite long negotiations, chapter after chapter of the acquis communautaire. And sometimes the length of those negotiations can create frustrations. Frustration for the countries who are applying to be a member, but also frustration on the European side that the reforms are not moving enough, and also, and foremost, frustrations for the citizens. So that's why it's interesting also that this French proposal of a European political community is on the table and was in the speech, because this also can definitely be a forum of discussions on issues which are definitely affecting the whole continent. It can be about geopolitical issues, it can be about energy issues, it can be, but it can also be, you know, those forum of discussions are a very good opportunity also to get to know each other better, to dialogue, to have this space to solve problems together as well. So, so it's not. I absolutely don't understand it as a way as a parallel path to accession. This is, I think, this is absolutely not the intent of the president, and she made it very clear, because she clearly mentioned the objective of enlargement. And then you mentioned the dialogue with other countries like China. So I mean, in the speech today, the president really mentioned a word with autocracies and democracies, and I very much liked your point about what you mentioned about something missing, because yeah, there need to be a dialogue with all countries to progress on issues, and there is still, I mean, there is dialogue with China. I mean, there is still dialogue with Russia. I mean, there are calls of head of states with Putin. Yeah, the dialogue is not cut, but the international forum for this dialogue, yeah.
So let me say that first, I like democracy and I like to live in a democracy, and I would like the rest of the world to live in a democracy. This is not the case. There are many autocracies out there. Some we dislike, but some we work with because we need to work with them. So I think we have to be a bit more nuanced than just simply democracies on one side, autocracies on the other side. Yes, of course, we have to make sure that human rights are respected everywhere, that freedom of speech is respected everywhere, that labor rights are respected everywhere, and the list goes on. But we are not honest when we divide the world in those terms, because there are many autocracies we are working with because we need that. So, my sense is that it is better to say democracy works much better, provides better results. This is a reality. You would love to live in a democracy. You feel better. Your rights are recognized. You enjoy certain freedoms, rather than dividing the world into bad and good. It's just my personal advice. At the end of the day, we need to work with everyone if we want to tackle climate change. We need to work with everyone if we need to tackle pandemics. We need to work with everyone if we want to tackle the financial stability of this world. We're working with Russia to exit Ukrainian grains to global markets. And we don't like, in the strongest terms, we have imposed sanctions on Putin's Russia. But we have not totally disconnected ourselves from Russia, because there is a need to maintain a space for dialogue and collaboration, which does not mean we need to be nice to each other, which does not mean we need to like each other, and which means we have to be very clear on where we stand. So, it's very clear that there are dialogues we don't want to have, and there are spaces where we need to continue to nurture a space for a potential discussion. On accessions, I think the most urgent one is to unlock those that are closest, because they've done their homework, and they are called Albania and Northern Macedonia. And if we unlock that, we will be credible, and if we don't, we will not be credible vis-à-vis them or any other that is waiting in the queue.
Let's take last very short remark by you before closing.
Okay, thank you. I'm Jarvis, and I'm in the Environmental Policy Program. And very short question. Is the European Union or the member states ready to impose any sanction when China is invading Taiwan?
So it will be your answer.
Let me tell you. When I was a politician, and you would put me this question, it's a shame that I'm no longer a politician, so I cannot give you my standard answer. But my standard answer would have been, I never respond to questions which start with an if. Okay? Now, of course, I'm no longer a politician. This is a university, and you can push. Over to you.
May I quote you? Honestly, I cannot answer this question because, I mean, indeed, it starts with the if. So what I can say is that I really hope we don't have to raise this question. Regarding Taiwan, I think there is also, I mean, that's my personal analysis, but the geopolitical focus of the US is more on Asia, China, and Taiwan, and I feel like there will be strong reactions on the US side. My feeling is that the US would like more Europe to deal with the Russian issue, and so that they can focus on what they see geopolitically as the biggest threat for them, being China. Voilà. But of course, I don't think there are any debate on this question at the European level at this stage. Huh?
Philippe, you want to do it?
In a sense, I just want to reiterate something I said at the beginning, which is that we need to also learn from our past mistakes, and in some sense, what's happened between Russia and Ukraine tells us that some of the economic dependencies, for example, that we have been toxic in the sense that they made it more difficult, or they increase the incentive, the perceived incentive for Russia that it would be easy in some sense, it would be difficult for Europe to react to the aggression because of the economic dependency. So there's a whole issue of the link between trade and war, and so from that point of view on China, I do think that indeed we need to learn our lessons from what has happened on Russia. So that means that doesn't mean we stop, of course, having a discussion with China, indeed, for all the reasons that Arancha gave. And we can't stop all the trade flows, and we should not stop all the trade flows. But we need to look at what are, and we need to target some of the strategic dependencies that we have with China, and we should indeed think of reducing these strategic dependencies. In a sense, that's a preparation for what you have in mind, which would be potential sanctions on China if there was an invasion of an attack on Taiwan.
If I may come back also to your question, and what goes deeper also with your question is that this war in Ukraine has been really, for the European Union, a big shift of paradigm. The European Union's roots were built on the ashes of World War II. And the strong belief behind the construction of the European Union is really to build concrete solidarities and step by step adjust to what those solidarities create. And this question of dependencies is actually at the heart of the European Union construction, to build dependencies between member states, between citizens, between companies, so that we don't do war together anymore because it's too costly. And what was done with Russia was with the same mindset that if you build dependencies, you build links as well. And there is this huge, of course, this huge shift of paradigm now, and this huge, and the president today in her speech, it was very interesting and very humbling because she acknowledged that we should have listened more to those who knew Putin best, yes, and to those who warned us externally, countries outside of the EU, but also countries inside the EU, which the European Union has not been able to hear enough, like Poland, like the Baltic states, who've really been warning. So, voilà.
So dear Jessica Larsons, dear Arancha and Philippe, and dear students, well, thanks a lot for this conference and participation. We'll continue this year to have a very nice debates on the European Union here in Sciences Po. Thanks a lot.